Mày cố nó tự dốc sang cái chuyện này dâu, sang nó nằm đần.
Welcome to Aaorta Theater. I'm your host, Alexander Pinkel. Thank you for joining in today, and I hope you enjoy a unique experience which combines the lore of old-time radio with the surreal macabre of everyday life. One cannot predict where the ebb and flow of Aaorta will carry you. Tonight's episode focuses on something that we can all beat along to, the human heart. A strange creature it is, the human heart, calm and peaceful in one breath, yet ready to burst in the next. Whether it's the endurance of daily exercise, falling in or out of love, or the simple excitement of finding money in an old coat pocket, the human heart is the soul's connection to the spirit of the world all around us. Tonight's episode, The Fifth Chamber, was written exclusively for Aaorta Theater by M.D. Campbell. Aaorta Theater is a copyrighted program. Reproduction or alteration is not permitted without expressed written consent. So sit back, get your pulse low, and enjoy a tale that will surely get your blood flowing in one direction or another. Strangers, friends, and family, I humbly present to you Aaorta Theater and The Fifth Chamber.
Everything was drenched in red, as if colored lenses had been placed over my eyes. It was coming from the block numbers of the large digital clock that hung above the two back doors. 11:42:37 p.m. An unexpected bump and everything shook. From the back doors, the world ran backwards. Darkness outside hid everything but the queer faces of street signs and gangly limbs of old trees, all snapped awake by the bright flashing lights. Out of sight and behind me, a man was talking in code. A radio voice replied, confirming whatever he said. Beside me, a man was sitting, opening small packages the size of sugar packets. He began to run an alcohol pad across my forearm. The smell sent me back to 8th grade science class when we had to prick our fingers to do a blood test. Along with 3 other kids, I nearly passed out, not from pricking my finger, but from the smell of that alcohol pad. "This is going to pinch a little," he said, followed by a severe poke in my left arm. The needle was cold as he stuck it in. I stared up at that digital clock. I could see the tiny cells that made up each number. I wondered, what would it sound like if it were alive? Would it bark, screech, or maybe just say something about time? 11:53:22 p.m. "Well, the hard part's over," the man beside me said, holding the needle out like a trophy. He smiled very wide as the red glow of the clock glazed his teeth. This was a man who had tasted copper and probably liked it. I tried to raise my arm, but it was restrained. My whole body was strapped down. Was I a rabid beast? A madman? A criminal? We hit another bump. Metal pieces clanked against plastic shelving. "Can I have some water, please?" I asked. The needleman reached into a box and pulled out a matrix of loose tubes. "I'm putting an IV in your arm, so just sit back and relax," he said. "We don't want it falling off." "The IV or his arm?" joked the man behind me, still out of sight. We hit another bump. I imagined it was a pothole, or maybe an animal, a small animal, a small animal, a small animal, a small one. The ambulance was racing through the rural back roads, speeding into curves that were not designed for driving fast. Even though I was strapped in, I gripped the rails for fear of falling over. I could smell my breath. "All right, I'm going to give you something to help you relax," the man beside me said. He attached something to the IV, twisting the tube with a sharp pinch. There was a light crunching sound coming from the man behind me. "I'm relaxed," I said. "I'm fine. I don't need to relax. I just want some water. Please." The man behind me began to cough loudly and said, "You need to calm down, friend. We're not going to lose this one." As the man beside me clicked the tube to the IV, I felt my veins become icy cold. The clock above me started to swirl, and the red glow turned into a haze of green. Everything was moving slow. I was made of cold motor oil, and I was beginning to ooze. My eyes were jelly and beginning to run down my cheeks. The laundry in the kitchen started moving the way it does after a fire. Hours later, I awoke to the sound of something hitting the floor near me. I opened my eyes to a dark, blurry world of paneled walls. The only light came from an old black and white television across the room, though the sound was turned down. I could make out the thin, glowing lines around the window shades, telling me it was daytime outside. I rubbed my eyes to clear the blur away, with no luck. On the coffee table beside me was my phone, a cup of tea, and several prescription bottles, though I couldn't read what they were. A box of Nilla wafers laid on its side, with 2 or 3 empty glasses that may have had milk on the bottom, I'm not sure. I never liked milk. The thought of drinking something from a cow's udder made me feel a little ill. I turned my head and was quickly reminded of the events from the night before. I felt like an overripe cherry beneath an armored car tire. My chest hurt so badly I'd have sworn a tree had grown up through my sternum and out and was then cut down. My phone rang. It was my mother calling. I quickly tapped on the phone and put her on speaker. She asked how things went. "I'm not sure, Mom," I told her. "Nobody's here and I have no idea what happened." "It's all over, honey," she said. "Everything went just fine." A sense of relief fell over me, but I was still confused and asked her what happened exactly. "Well, they didn't have to go in this time," she said. "It came out all on its own. We're so happy for you." Despite the pain in my chest and the headache, I was so glad it was over and that I wouldn't have to go through this all over again. The last time, we were sitting in an old playing card-themed diner. We sat in the One-Eyed Jack booth, waiting for our entrees to come. I remember I had ordered stuffed peppers with extra rice and beans and no sour cream. I don't like sour cream. I didn't want to eat the sour cream. I would not eat the sour cream. If they brought the stuffed peppers and they had sour cream on them, I would have been disappointed and maybe told the waitress. "I don't like sour cream," I'd have said, but they don't usually understand how that works when you try very hard to communicate. And when you speak your mind and voluntarily outline your needs, they often have a difficult time processing those needs. Anyway, we were sitting in the One-Eyed Jack booth, and my mother was talking about the flaws in our kitchen calendar at home. That's when it started. I knew something was coming, but I didn't think it would be so abrupt. As a kid, my mother always helped me through it, but it had been years since it last happened. Now, I'm fully aware that it can happen, I just never know when. I know that the usual signs are fatigue, reading a lot, and genuine feelings. I thought about the street signs snapping awake by the bright flashing lights of the ambulance. The television flickered, splashing twisted images across paneled walls. I dragged my fingertips slowly across my chest. Anxiety and stress washed over the stitches that felt very deep. It was a tidy pig walking into a small shop to make nice with the sweet diary of a woman who caught their fancy. But, like most paintings, she was too caught up to really appreciate his courageous affections. I thought about what I'd just been through. The seed that was injected into my arm just months ago had taken root. It grew quick, much quicker than before. And that meant my time here was going to be very short. The air that comes when we fill an empty tire. I reached out and lifted the Nilla wafer box, but it was empty, just crumbs. So I poured the crumbs into my head and dropped the box to the floor. I grabbed the tea, which was cold, and washed the crumbs down. I could feel that dizzy sense of medication in me, and my whole body wanted to just lie down and go to sleep. I started thinking about the first time this all happened, and when I went for an MRI to see what was going on. After the MRI, I took a ferry to Martha's Vineyard to spend the day. Under an old pier, I found a banana peel on top of some rocks. It had been placed there very intentionally. I lied down under that pier and began to connect with what was growing inside my chest. I fell asleep for a while, and when I awoke later, I wondered who placed that banana peel under the pier. I mean, why not pears or apricots? And did they eat it under the pier? I sat back in my chair with some difficulty and looked at the prescription bottles, imagining how long my face was. We all knew what this was about, and we all knew what was going to happen. So no one was surprised, yet everyone was distant. Once the seed got into my bloodstream, it was just a waiting game before it landed in my fifth chamber. All those people, especially the ones from school and work, unaware of my rare deformity and what it could do. But, like when I told Deborah back in college, there was no proof. There was no way to show I was telling the truth. After all these months of incubation, the seed had been nurtured. I had very little to do with it. Now it was out and free, leaving me with a terrible wound in my chest and the heaviness of being alone. My little acorn had sprouted into a tree, leaving shell remnants behind for the doctors to pluck and feed the chipmunks. I grew sad, wondering where my little offspring was now. Was it wandering aimlessly, looking for love, or holed up in some temperature-controlled environment? My time was running out as I glazed across the room and the paneling. My skin was yellow and my organs were shrinking. Shards of my pink neon history were moving like 80s dancers in slow motion. I knew it wouldn't be much longer. The weaker and smaller I would get, my little offspring would grow stronger and smarter. And being old, this old, too old to come back, I would not be able to meet at the crossing stage. No eye contact, facial expressions, or shared smiles. This time, I would fade into a pruned heap, and my offspring would resume my place and all my objectives. No one would know, and no one would notice. Well, maybe a question here and there, but who would care enough to question it? The truth is, I'm okay with it all. I wasn't sure if I would be, but I am. I'm tired, and drudging on with this empty deformity in my heart would have left me bitter and sullen. My fifth chamber, that thing the doctors obsessed with for so many years, no longer had room for another new seed. It was all over, and though I'll miss that crossing stage, it'll be good to finally sleep, knowing everything is just going to go on. But I wonder if my offspring will develop the same deformity and keep this thing going on for another 5, 6, 7 cycles. I turned off the television, closed my eyes, and just decided to listen to the sounds coming from the window shades outside. Wind blowing in the trees. Behind my eyes I could see that old stump where we used to play X-Men and have fancy lunches. The old fence in the backyard where we used to sneak behind and share secrets. I drifted off into sleep. I don't know if I ever woke up again or if my offspring had simply assumed my role. Either way, I was happy.
Weighing in at just under 1 pound, the human heart can pump endless emotions throughout our lives. And while it's just another muscle like a bicep or a deltoid, we cherish the heart with more affection than any other organ. Whether it's because of the mythic history or because it opens the intimate connection to those around us, all with the same crimson fire that keeps us going, drives us forward, and sustains our lives. Whatever it is, it's clear from tonight's tale that we all seem to share the same similar components in our body, yet we can never truly tell what's going on beneath the iron will of those we assume to know. Thank you for joining in for tonight's episode. I hope you'll subscribe to discover new, unusual, and unique experiences in the future. May you walk wisely and always keep a bounce in your pulse. For Aaorta Theater, I am your host, Alexander Pinkel. Good night.
Amay ko na tuyok sa gizong niyaw sa nananong dana. Ayaw na